All right, we're good to go. How's everyone doing out there? Let me know if you guys can see me and hear me. And Alexander, you want to say something?
Yes.
See if they can see you and hear you?
Indeed. I hope no problems on that front. We had a few glitches at the beginning last time, but I hope none this time. And it's always a huge pleasure to be with you all on this Friday evening here in London. I think it's different times in the different parts of the world, but in London it's Friday evening. Beautiful day here.
Great. And we have Spartan Warrior Queen with us as well. Welcome, Spartan Warrior Queen. Good to have you here. Hello, Valley S. Good to have you here. Quick news. We have a new contest, a new giveaway with Patriotic Legacy. And this is a good one because it is for this month. You use the code Duran20, you get 20% off, and you're automatically entered to win a pink Patriotic Beacon 3 for breast cancer awareness.
This is what we're talking about. Yep.
Yes,
this is what we're talking about.
It is that flashlight, but in a pink color. I'll have photos up on the next videos so you guys can see. It actually looks really, really slick. Breast cancer awareness. The contest for pink Patriot Beacon 3. And you also get a magic mug. This is of the USA. This is one of Serbia, but you get a USA magic mug in the giveaway as well.
Here we go. So that's what we get. That's what you get. You get this mug with the USA flag.
Awesome. And another bit of news before we jump into the Navalny story. And there's going to be a little bit of a detective story that we're going to be reporting on tonight, because there's a lot of information that just doesn't fit. So we're going to try to put some pieces together and see what's going on. I got my shipment of Duran magic hats. I just want to show everybody because I'm really excited. This is one with Switzerland.
Wow.
Check it out. Looks good. This is embroidered. You can see the famous Swiss flag. And I also got, Alexander, and to everyone watching, a trucker cap with Poland. And it's actually, the logo is black on black here with the mesh in the back. Really nice. You can see the flag of Poland embroidered. So you can get those at the Duran shop. I'm really excited. The hats are awesome. Awesome looking. So saying that, welcome everybody to another Friday live stream. Alexander, how are you doing? What's new?
I'm doing very well. Very beautiful day. And by the way, very excited about those caps. I should say I have a particular fondness for Poland. I mean, it's a wonderful country, an absolutely great country. And I'm thrilled to see we've now got a cap with that. And those look like awesome hats. Definitely must have one, or more than one, or many of them, actually.
All right. Let's jump right into it, guys, because we have a lot to unpack. Welcome to everybody, wherever you are in the world. Hello, Helen. How are you? Welcome to everyone. And Alexander, we need to talk about water bottles. What is going on here in the Navalny saga? What's the latest?
Well, I think this is the week where, as I said, this already very tangled story collapsed into absurdity. And I've been reading lots of people who've been writing about this. I've been reading people in Russia. I've been reading people in America. I've been reading people who are generally very, very critical of the Russian government. But these are people, who are, skeptical and open-minded. And this is the point. This is the point where the story has lost them. They've begun to ask many of the questions that, on the Duran we've been asking right from the beginning. And what has happened, it's fairly clear, is that if you remember, right at the very beginning, when Navalny first fell ill, we had the story that he'd been poisoned by drinking a cup of poisoned tea at Tomsk airport. And then CCTV footage appeared, which showed that it would have been impossible, basically, for it to have been the tea, because it was provided to Navalny by one of his aides. He went to a sort of bar or whatever, came back with the tea. There was no way that the person who prepared the tea could have known it would be given to Navalny. And there was no sign on the CCTV cameras that it was, in fact, anybody showed anybody putting poison in it. So what seems to have happened is that somebody decided that the story of the tea didn't really work. And we've now got a new explanation for how Navalny got to be poisoned, except this explanation makes absolutely no sense. So the first thing we heard is that the German laboratories have supposedly detected traces of Novichok in a water bottle, a plastic water bottle that Navalny allegedly drank from. And the implication is, in fact, the statement is that this is how he actually became poisoned. Not, by the way, quite clear where he drank this water. I mean, not in the German statements from this bottle, but, you know, it was the bottle, supposedly. And then we had further information, and that information has come from Navalny's own people. And they say that the water bottle in question, or is it water bottles in plural? There's now some uncertainty about that too. 3, apparently, yeah, exactly. All came from his hotel room in Tomsk. And supposedly, after he was poisoned, 4 hours after he checked out, his team returned to the hotel, carried out a search of his hotel room, you know, wearing gloves and all that. They had, you know, some kind of recording equipment with them, even if it's only a mobile phone, and they recorded themselves. There's a video, you can find it, of them, you know, hunting around the room, searching it. Bear in mind, this is 4 hours after he checked out. And you see photos there, pictures there of various water bottles, plural, all plastic water bottles. And what we are now being told is that it was these water bottles, or one of these water bottles, that contained this deadly poison. Note that these water bottles were not provided to the Russian investigators or to the Russian doctors or to the Russian laboratories, but they were supposedly, in plural or in singular, smuggled out of Russia by Navalny's team, by this individual that we've discussed in previous programs, who is now apparently in Britain, and brought to Germany, where they were tested and they were found to have positive tracings of Novichok on them. Now, note certain rather obvious facts. The people who were hunting around the hotel room looking at these bottles wear no protective equipment at all except gloves. None of them, however, is ill. These water bottles are somewhat fragile objects, and we are told that Novichok is this incredibly dangerous poison, 8 times more poisonous or toxic than the most deadly nerve gases developed by the British and the Americans, which, you know, would kill you instantly. So the whole thing is beginning to look, I think, completely absurd. By the way, the Germans have struggled with this story. They're now saying, you know, there's obviously a new unknown type of Novichok that is supposedly very slow acting. I mean, you know, that already makes
very weak.
Very weak, exactly. Slow acting form of Novichok already doesn't make sense to me. Why would anybody want to poison someone in Navalny's situation with a very slow acting poison? But put all that aside. No part of this story makes sense. I mean, we're asked to believe that, you know, these water bottles were presumably put in the hotel room, because the implication is that they were, you know, I presume in the fridge in the hotel room. The people who put them there would not have known that Navalny would have gone to that particular hotel room, because when his team goes to a hotel, they rent out various rooms, but, you know, it just happens that they knew somehow that he would go to that particular hotel room. They assumed that only Navalny would drink from these bottles, not, you know, he wouldn't sort of bring his people round. They might not all share a bottle together. They might not all get poisoned. And then, supposedly, after Navalny leaves, checks out, this hotel room is left unoccupied, uncleared. These deadly assassins from the Kremlin, instructed to kill Navalny, do absolutely nothing. You know, the news is full of the fact that Navalny is ill. Allegations of poisoning are floating around, but nothing is done. And all these bottles with the deadly poison are left there in the room for Navalny's people to find. I mean, there are other things which I don't understand, such as why the hotel would allow these people to carry out a search 4 hours after Navalny has checked out, but never mind. And of course, as I said, deadly nerve gas, extraordinary deadly nerve gas in a plastic bottle. And of course, nobody else falls ill, becomes injured, nothing, no sign that anybody's hurt. Now, I don't want to sound cynical, but this is an unbelievable story. I mean, lots of people are saying it is completely unbelievable. I mean, it is far-fetched, beyond absurdity. And, I don't want to name some of the people who are saying this because I don't want to, stop embarrassing them, having questions diverted to them. But, if you go, academics, people of this sort, say it just doesn't make any kind of sense. And it obviously doesn't. I've also talked to a person who was a very senior investigator in a police department in the United States. He also told me that it doesn't make any kind of sense. He also pointed out to me, which is absolutely obvious, that this is a crime scene, supposedly, and the bottles are being removed from the crime scene. So, in effect, the crime scene is being manipulated with full TV, or with film of it all happening. And then, of course, on top of all of that, we also have increasing confusion from the Germans. So the Germans say, because after the foreign minister of Germany said 2 weeks ago that the Russians would get all the information, the Germans say, we've passed it all to the OPCW. The OPCW should talk to the Russians should talk to the OPCW. The Russians come to the OPCW. The OPCW says to the Russians, well, you should talk to the Germans. We can't say anything. So OPCW says, talk to the Germans. Germans say, talk to the OPCW. It's all apparently confirmed that they're each saying these things. So it looks to me a completely absurd story, obviously cobbled together in a great hurry in order to reconcile contradictory evidence. The Germans and the OPCW are obviously very, very reluctant to disclose information. And it seems to me this thing is starting to fall apart. There does need to be an explanation, an investigation. There are lots of unanswered questions. But I've been cynical about this story, skeptical about this story right from the start. I mean, I think now I just don't believe a word that anybody involved is saying. I mean, it's just, we've now gone past the point where anything is believable anymore.
Mm-hmm. Spartan Warrior Queen says, is the water sparkling or still?
Well, that's
sparkling.
Excellent question. Absolutely
excellent question. Yes.
I mean, I should say there is film. I mean, these people filmed, hunting around.
Yeah, it's on Instagram. It's on Instagram. I actually did a video on our second channel and actually put the Instagram video on there. So everyone can go and see exactly what Alexander is talking about.
Yeah.
They were filming it with their mobile phone and they're in the hotel room. Yeah. And they're just wearing protective gloves, no masks, nothing.
Nothing.
Of course, the question comes to mind, if you were part of Navalny's team and someone told you, hey, go to his room and start grabbing stuff because we think he might have gotten poisoned and that poison might be Novichok, would you go? I would be like, nah, no, thank you. I quit. I mean, they're in there, 3-4 guys, and they're just casually just throwing stuff in bags, and no one cares at all that this could be the deadliest poison on the planet. But they're fine with it.
Absolutely,
and they're also saying contaminated.
Exactly, and they're showing. And they're showing the bottles, by the way, as if they knew that the poison was in the bottles, which I find really very remarkable.
I mean, these aren't forensic scientists. So the other question is, obviously, now the whole scene, the whole hotel room is absolutely contaminated, the crime scene.
Absolutely.
If it is a crime.
If it is a crime, exactly.
It's completely contaminaminated.
Yes.
Now, a couple of things. We have a viewer that is an expert in these types of things, in chemistry and all this stuff. He's a scientist. He knows about this stuff. And he wrote me a couple of observations. Mm-hmm. But my one comment and question, which you can answer later, Alexander, is why is the UK doing this to Russia? Just hold that thought, though, because I referenced the Skripals and I'm going to reference Navalny. Mm-hmm. This viewer sent me an email, and he made a lot of good points. But one of the points was that this Maria Pevchiki, who was on Navalny's team and was with them, is definitely, it seems like she's definitely up to no good. I don't know. She's involved somehow. But anyway, she went to the UK first, and then she went to Germany. That's the story. The Germans got this water bottle, and they said, she brought the water bottle, for what we understand. And they said, this water bottle is contaminated with Novichok. That's the story now. So the Germans got the water bottle, and they found it either on the outside or on the inside. Who knows? But Porton Down is in the UK. There is that possibility that she went to the UK. They saw the first story was not holding up the T story. And so the UK MI6 officials, the scientists, they put a little chemical Novichok or something that could be detected without harming anybody by the German labs. And there you go. Now you have your water bottle Novichok story. Maybe. The other thing that you brought up that this viewer said is obviously the question of timing. Obviously, Navalny, if he drank this water in his hotel room, which is now the story, you're looking, yes, at 2, 3, 4, 5 hours removed from when he got sick. He was in his hotel room, then he went to the airport, he had his tea, he got on the plane took off, then he got sick. From what we understand about Novichok and this type of poison, that's not how it works.
No.
Not how it works at all. Usually you're going to get sick immediately. So that also doesn't gel. And we know that he supposedly, the story is we know that he got sick in his hotel room because it's the bottle that's contaminated and he drank the bottle and it was still in his hotel room and it was picked up by his team. That's also very, very suspicious. So you have,
No, absolutely. I'm listening because the whole thing, as I said, is stacking up to becoming more and more difficult to explain and understand. I mean, none of this makes any sense. And again, I come to a simple point. Why would somebody use a slow-acting poison in this situation? By the way, it's a point that police officer, that police investigator made to me. I mean, if you want to eliminate Navalny, why would you use a slow-acting poison? Surely you would use something else. And does Novichok ever work? Do nerve gases, by definition, function as slow-acting poisons anyway? The whole thing is very weird.
Well, if he was poisoned with Novichok, according once again to this viewer, he must have been poisoned. If he was poisoned with Novichok, then he must have been poisoned while on the plane. That would be the only explanation for Novichok. So that it's fast acting on the plane, it would have had to have been via injection.
Yes.
That's the only way Navalny could have been poisoned without it contaminating or harming anybody else.
Yes.
You come to the question, was Navalny asleep and they injected him or something? I doubt it. I doubt Navalny sat there and said, yeah, inject me with something. That's
no, sure not.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. So the whole thing, to me and to this viewer, points to some sort of misdirection.
Yes.
There was a misdirection with the tea. It didn't work. Now you seem to have this misdirection with the water bottle.
Yes.
What is the purpose of a misdirection? Why are they doing this? Why did they go all the way to the UK, this Maria Pevchik, go to the UK, and then go to Germany? And was she carrying a water bottle from the UK to Germany? And was that water bottle the evidence that they gave to the Germans? Do the Germans know? Maybe the Germans don't know that the MI6 or the UK or the UK government or God knows who else in the UK is actually setting them up. Could this have something to do with Brexit? Could this have something to do with something else, with Nord Stream 2, with energy, with gas, with Belarus? To me, I go back to my first question that I made to you and I bring it full circle. Why is the UK doing this? Because it's, I'm sorry, they're Skripals and now Navalny. The coincidence just doesn't stick. There's something's going on in the UK.
Well, indeed.
I'm just assuming. I don't have evidence.
Yeah.
But we do know that Maria, from what we understand, Maria Pevchik did go to the UK, and then she went to Germany, and she's the one that brought the water bottle. From what we understand, I may be wrong. People in the live stream, if I'm wrong, please correct me on that. That's the story that we've been fed now, outside of the tea story, which they've kind of just said, scrap it. We're not going to go with that.
Well, the tea story has collapsed. I'm going to make a guess, by the way. I think the story of the bottle has been put together in a hurry, because the Russians have been saying that they've actually traced all of the places where Navalny had food and liquids, and they've tested them. They've been able to establish conclusively what he drank and what he ate, and presumably that there was no poison in them. So since the tea story is discredited, and since all other possibilities have been eliminated, somebody, I'm not trying to get a guess who at the moment, but somebody said, we have got to provide some explanation of how Navalny came to be poisoned. And so they came up with the idea of the bottle. Now, there are some questions here, and I'm not able to give answers to this, but how did it, if that is right, then what did actually happen when they searched the hotel room? When did that search of that hotel room take place?
On Instagram, the cover photo says, on the Instagram, it says 1 hour before finding out about the poisoning. But 1 hour after finding out about the poisoning. That's what the Instagram cover says.
Yes.
So we'll just take it at that.
We'll take it at that. But, again, I mean, that makes some questions to me, because, as I said, I mean, I've stayed in hotels in Russia, in Russian provincial cities. My experience is that once you check out, it's not that easy to get back into your room. That's the first thing I would say about that. I mean, and who were these people? I mean, hotel management would be asking, I would have thought, who are these people who suddenly want to go back into Navalny's room, and for what purpose? And would they really allow them to carry out a search in that way? I mean, that does seem to be a bit strange. Maybe Navalny's a well-known man. Maybe they were prepared to make exceptions, but it does all seem a bit odd to me. But that's the first thing. The second thing is, I mean, how does one reconcile all of this with the fact that the Germans claim that they found Novichok in Navalny himself? In other words, that he was contaminated, that he was poisoned in some way. There is a possibility, I mean, it's a theory, but it's a theory that I've heard expressed by a Russian MP, that Navalny was actually poisoned, not on the plane from Tomsk, but on the plane from Omsk to Germany. That was where the poison was introduced, not perhaps by the German doctors. I'm not suggesting anything there, but by somebody else, some of the Russian people, his own people, in other words, or people he thought were his own people, who were on that plane. So that's just one possibility. I don't know whether this Maria was on that plane or not, and I'm not going to guess, but whatever. I'm not going to try and reconstruct. I don't know what happened. All I can say definitely is that the story doesn't make sense. And it's interesting you bring up Salisbury and the Salisbury event, because just as with this case, the Navalny event, the Navalny case, the Salisbury attack, the Skripal attack, somebody made a big mistake. Possibly the same person made a big mistake in the Salisbury case. And it was, in some ways, a very similar mistake, which is, in order to try and strengthen, as they thought, the case against Russia in the Salisbury case, they left, as we know, a perfume bottle, which was then found in Salisbury, and which then resulted in 2 other people being contaminated, 2 British people, one of whom died. The British authorities have never been able to explain that perfume bottle. There are huge problems in the timeline. It doesn't really make sense with the allegation that they have been bringing against the Russians and against those 2 Russians who they fingered. But the same mistake seems to have been made here. Somebody set out to strengthen the case by introducing this water bottle, And all that has happened instead is that it has weakened it. And the fact that the same kind of mistake was made suggests to me a connection, and that connection logically points to Britain. Now, I'm not saying who in Britain, because I don't know, but someone in Britain, it seems to me, is making mistakes now.
Why? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from this? Because you, as you were speaking, Alexander, I thought to myself, why couldn't they just let this be? Why couldn't they just have forgotten about it? This Navalny poisoning was not even 1/100th the outrage or exposure of the Skripals.
No,
people really didn't care that much. They could have just let it be. But they're not letting it be because there's something else to be gained. Real quick, Alexander, the viewer that I was talking to sent me an email. He's watching this live stream. And he said the water bottle was necessary to provide the Germans with a pure sample of the toxin. Once the Germans had the toxin, they could easily determine that Navalny had been poisoned with that toxin. By the way, I have his permission to read the email, just so everyone knows he gave his permission. And this is another message he sent. Might be interesting to know how Maria Pevchiki went to Germany. We know she left Russia on August 22nd. We know that by August 23rd or 24th, the Germans had analyzed the samples and concluded that the toxin was in the Novichok family. No direct commercial passenger flights were going from Russia to Germany, as far as I know. At that time, for sure, there were flights to the UK.
They weren't. I can say that for a fact.
Okay, perfect. There were flights to the UK, Istanbul, and maybe Switzerland. I know because I flew Istanbul on August 2nd from Russia. Okay. When I flew, London was the only other option. I think flights between Switzerland were opened shortly thereafter, but I can't explain why. If Maria traveled via London, and if she is an MI6 agent, her water bottles could have been doused with the correct Novichok family substance at Port and Down, and then she could have flown it on to Berlin. That way, she never was at risk of being caught with the substance in Russia, and Port and Down could have made sure the bottle was not going to poison Maria on the way to Germany.
Well, I mean, this is a very interesting set of ideas, but the one I would focus on, and the point that's been made there, which I find very revealing, is the fact that you now have in this water bottle apparently a pure extract of the poison, which would have assisted the German laboratory to identify. Notice that, of course, the Russians didn't have that, and so they didn't find anything. If he was poisoned. Now, that again suggests manipulation in this affair. Maybe, as I said, he was poisoned after he left Omsk, not when he left Tomsk. I mean, I don't know, but it does seem to have been, there does seem to be a British connection here. And it does seem to me that someone in Britain is manipulating the events in Germany. That's how it looks to me. I think the Germans, by the way, who are looking extremely nervous about this, are aware of it. Who in Britain? Well, we can guess. I don't want to point fingers because, I don't think Steele has that kind of abilities or skills. And I've never heard of him being involved in those sort of things. But the kind of people who Steele works with, people in the intelligence services, former intelligence people who are very, very anti-Russian. But also, please remember that London is the center of the anti-Putin Russian, not just Russian, but the whole nexus of people here who are pathologically hostile to the Putin government and who are determined in whatever way they can to undermine it and destabilize it, because this is so contrary to what they have aimed to achieve in Russia itself. So it's not impossible. It's quite it would be quite possible, I would have thought, that some of those people were behind it, and they are certainly capable of doing some of those things. And some of those people would certainly have the means, I think, to acquire the kind of poison that we're talking about, and would have the contacts within Britain, possibly even in Port and Down, to achieve that kind of objective. Can I just point out that Maria, I'm going to call her Maria, her surname I find difficult. that Maria has a connection with one of those people, who is, of course, Khodorkovsky.
Who also resides in what country? UK, but also in
Switzerland, I believe. But
right. And the viewer said that there were flights UK, Germany, and Switzerland.
Switzerland, exactly. So
something
yes, it's something to note. I mean, I get. I mean, I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm not saying, I don't know what a precise role was. One thing is indisputable, however, she has not cooperated. She has not provided answers to the Russian investigators, and she was the person, apparently, who brought the bottle to Germany. So, I mean, she's obviously a very important witness, and that's, I'm again choosing my words very carefully indeed.
Could all of this just have nothing to do with geopolitics or Nord Stream 2 or Belarus? Let me take back what I said. Maybe this is just all about disgruntled, very wealthy, very powerful Russian oligarchs who have been vanquished from Russia.
Yeah.
Some may have been imprisoned for a certain time, and now they're free. And this is just all about embarrassing the Kremlin and embarrassing Putin, because the Skripal case, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Skripal thing happened right before the World Cup.
That's right.
And it was extremely embarrassing for Russia. The UK, England almost canceled their appearance as well. They almost said, we're not going. Many other countries were pressured not to go. And FIFA was pressured to actually take away the World Cup from Russia.
Yes.
So it was a very tense situation for Russia, very tense situation for Putin, who had put a lot of his own personal capital into the World Cup event. I mean, he really put everything he had to back that World Cup. So if he had lost it, it would have been a tremendous embarrassment to him and to the country. And now you have this coming along at the time of Nord Stream 2, a very big event, a very big cooperation between Russia and Germany. You've said many times that if the Russians and the Germans can work together, then it would be a huge event, not only for Germany, but for Russia as well. Could this be some sort of just sticking it to the Kremlin right when important, significant things are about to take place?
Absolutely. And of course, the other one, which one should always bear in mind, is the new vaccine, Sputnik 5, which had just been announced shortly before. And of course, there was a campaign against it in the West, especially in Britain, by the way. And so that might have been partly an attempt to discredit this particular vaccine. Somebody by the way, I'm not promoting the vaccine, I know nothing about it, but some people some of those sorts of people might have been very annoyed that the Russians were coming up with a vaccine, and might have wanted to say, we don't trust Russian vaccines because these people are poisoners and murderers and all that sort of thing. That's a possibility. But I'm going to say this: if it was an intelligence agency, then the geopolitical possibilities are enormous and they're huge. And there's lots of intelligence agencies in Britain, in Ukraine, in all sorts of places, which have a very, very powerful animus against Russia and against Putin and the Putin government in particular. There is no question. And Belarus is certainly a big issue for many people, because there was the election on August 9th. Lukashenko has faced down the protests in Belarus. The Russians are supporting him. That might have caused a great deal of anger. In fact, I know for a fact it has caused a great deal of anger in some intelligence circles, that that particular attempt to change a government friendly to Russia has failed. So there was that. Obviously, there is Nord Stream 2, which many governments in the West are very unhappy with. The US government is unhappy with it. The British government is extremely unhappy about it, and it's made its hostilities very clear and open about that. Ukraine is very unhappy about it. Poland is very unhappy about it. So there is that too. There is also the fact that some of these governments are not particularly keen on Germany either, and they have their own issues with Germany, and they particularly do not want Germany and Russia coming close and tying the knot on economic cooperation. There is always nervousness in Europe when the two most powerful countries in Europe, Germany and Russia, start working together, because obviously that makes many, many people nervous. But as I said, if it is a personal project by someone, then embarrassing the Kremlin is always part of the agenda. Discrediting Sputnik 5 might be part of it too. But I think also there was the fact that, and I've said this before, Navalny failed to organize successfully opposition to the Russian constitutional referendum, which took place in June and July. And there may have been a calculus that, well, he's not succeeding in that respect, but let's see whether we can create some kind of a scandal around him, and that might affect the outcome of the Russian local elections, which were coming up in September. Those local elections, by the way, have come and gone, and there was no great upset. Navalny's people, won, I think, 3 seats out of the thousands that were fought. So, there are multiple motives. Unfortunately, there are too many motives to be able to isolate one and to say this tells you who is responsible. But what I will say, and I said this many times, the one body, agency, group of people that have no motive to do away with Navalny at all were the Russian authorities. They gain absolutely nothing by this, and I'm pretty sure that they didn't do it and have any part in it. And if they had done it, I can assure you there will not be, bottles with Novichok lying around for hours in Russian hotel rooms for Navalny's people to find.
Yeah. I mean, look, Navalny's been arrested 24 times.
Absolutely.
The Russians had multiple opportunities to not only dispose of Navalny, to arrest him, to keep him in prison forever.
Absolutely.
They could have done a number of things to Navalny as he was residing in Russia, but they let him be because they knew he was not influential. He was a no-show.
Exactly. He was fading. The other thing to understand about Navalny is he played a complicated game. He was, trying to be a liberal to the liberals in Russia. He tried to be a nationalist to the nationalists in Russia. All that he achieved by doing that was that he annoyed both of them. For the liberals, he was far too much of a nationalist, so they distrusted him for that. For the nationalists, he was far too much of a pro-American liberal who backed Crimea being returned to Ukraine, for them to trust him either. So he fell directly between those two stools. By the time of this incident in August, his star had completely faded. He is not the big force in Russia, or this popular figure in Russia that so many people insist he is.
Yeah. Guys, hit that like, help us out, help this channel out, hit that like and get this video out there so it ends up on Google's search algorithm. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen, for all your help. Thank you to everyone who has hit that like and everyone who is watching this live stream right now. Alexander, we know that intel agencies do work with oligarchs. We know that as a fact because we know that the intel agencies worked with Oleg Deripaska during the Russiagate stuff.
Precisely.
So it could be a combination of both. One of the viewers in the live stream said it could be a combination of both. We know that. What is up with UK intelligence? They are everywhere. I mean, everywhere. They're in the US, they're in Russia, they're in Europe. What is going on?
Well, I'll tell you straight away what has happened, of course. And, this is, we have to understand the context of it. I mean, 60, 70 years ago, Britain was a great power. It has vast armed forces, huge intelligence agencies. The British Empire, was across the world. Now, all of that, much of that has gone. I mean, Britain is still a powerful country, still a rich country. The one thing that remains are British intelligence agencies. They're still there. And of course, what happens is the British compensate for the fact that they've lost power militarily, that they don't have all these sweeping, empire around the world, by emphasizing to a very heavy degree the strength of their intelligence services and they try to gain influence through them. And by the way, and I speak now as a British person, it is an exceptionally bad idea. All that it is doing is that it's involving Britain in all sorts of, skullduggery and cloak and dagger stuff, which simply makes all sorts of countries around the world deeply distrustful of Britain. If you talk to people in the Middle East, you hear them talking about this a great deal. You hear about the extent of British involvement, British intelligence involvement in Syria, for example. You hear people in the Middle East talk about this. You hear, of course, people in Russia talk about this, and you're now starting to hear people in the United States talk about it because of Russiagate. I mean, Britain obviously needs intelligence services whilst it remains an important country, but this attempt to try and use them as a substitute for the kind of imperial power and reach that Britain once had, it simply leads Britain into many problems. Now, that's one thing. The other thing, and I say this with huge regret, the British have somehow, and I don't completely understand why, I'm sure many of our viewers will say why, but they have a huge animus against the Russians. I mean, they have an obsession with them. I mean, the British have Russia on the brain all the time. I wrote a whole piece in Consortium News about this. I mean, Americans may find it remarkable when I say this, but the sort of anti-Russian thing that you read in the US is dwarfed by what you get in Britain. And it's so ubiquitous amongst so many people here. You meet it amongst academics, you meet it amongst journalists, you meet it at so many different levels. And of course, any obsessive attitude like that leads you into all kinds of mistakes and foolish things. And I think perhaps the Navalny thing is a consequence of this. I mean, again, trying to play this very complicated game in Russia. You know, Christopher Steele was heavily involved. You mentioned Christopher Steele. He was very heavily involved in Russia in the 1990s. And he got involved, British intelligence to be precise, got involved with all sorts of extremely, dodgy and semi-criminal, or in fact outright criminal people like Boris Berezovsky and the late oligarch who was involved with all kinds of jihadi terrorist groups. I mean, bizarre and terrible stuff, actually. And he was able to come here and get asylum here because it was known the British intelligence was protecting him. And he's just one example of that. I mean, the reason we've got all these oligarchs turn up here in Britain, and by the way, our viewer is absolutely right. You can't say where the oligarchs begin and the intelligence communities stop. And with British intelligence, it's particularly close with some of these oligarchs. But it's an incredibly dangerous and foolish game that Britain is playing. Running all these kind of strange operations. And it's ultimately going to get Britain into trouble because, you can pull it off a couple of times, but more and more people are going to start getting more suspicious of you. The Russians are completely suspicious of Britain already. The US is going to start becoming so, especially after Russiagate. And ultimately, as a trading nation, we need to some extent to get on with everybody. We need to be, if not necessarily friends, open for business with everybody. I mean, that was what the City of London was all about. So, if you're going to start playing these kind of games, it's going to get you into trouble. So on the one hand, why do the British become involved in this way? It's over-ambition and over-reliance on cloak and dagger and intelligence services and all that. By the way, it's not a coincidence that Britain is the world capital of spy fiction. I mean, John le Carré, James Bond, all of that. It's not a coincidence. And on the other hand, as I said, it's this obsession with Russia, which is frankly unbalanced and very troubled, and is doing ultimately, like all obsessions do, it's going to do Britain harm. I will going to add one final point to all of this, which is, of course, from a British point of view. They are very concerned at the moment to keep the US focused on Russia at a time when they are worried that the US is thinking increasingly less about Russia and more about the Pacific and the challenge from China. So they've also got that worry because, of course, for the British, China is far away, but Russia shares a continent with them. So that's another aspect of what drives the British to do all these things.
Yeah, but why do the British want the U.S. focused on Russia?
Well, because I said they've got this obsession with Russia. For them, Russia is this great adversary. I don't think that is true at all, by the way. I mean, I think you go to Russia, they're far less interested in the British than the British are interested in them. But they've developed this image of the Russians as this great adversary, smirch and all that. So, this is something that they're still playing. They're still playing this Cold War, which for the British, reaches all the way back into the 19th century. The British in the 19th century also had an obsession with Russia then. We had the Crimean War, we had, the Great Game in Central Asia, and some people in Britain simply can't give up on it.
Is Nord Stream 2 going ahead?
Well, I've come round to the view that it probably is. I think that there was some talk. We've done a video about this. There was some talk about a week ago that the Germans were going to pull out of Nord Stream 2. Is looking increasingly as if, after thinking about it, they backed off doing so. The economics ministry in Germany is apparently absolutely determined to see Nord Stream 2 happen. The economics committee of the Bundestag, the German parliament, is apparently also committed to Nord Stream 2. So is the SDP, which is part of Merkel's coalition. So is much of the CDU. And so is the German business community. And the idea of getting the EU to impose sanctions on Russia to stop Nord Stream 2 apparently hasn't been at all popular with the other European states. So, I think they're going to do it because I think from the German point of view, from a political point of view, the advantages of doing it still greatly outweigh the disadvantages. And I've even seen a German politician say that it is absolutely absurd to link an economic and commercial project like Nord Stream 2 to what happened in Russia to a Russian opposition leader. So I think it's going to happen. I mean, it's obviously a constantly changing story. And by the way, the Germans have not handled this well. I mean, they've not handled the Navalny business at all well. They've screwed up. They've screwed up big time. They've landed themselves in this mess. They should have kept clean out of it. But anyway, they have landed themselves in this mess. But I think overall, they will go ahead with Nord Stream 2. And we will see a Navalny Act of some kind being passed by the European Parliament, and sanctions of some Russian officials, expulsions of some diplomats. But I think Nord Stream 2 will continue, and the big economic connections will continue also.
Yeah, if Merkel has any sense, she would kill this story.
Absolutely.
Just put the word out in the press and the media in Germany, at least, and just bury the story because it's just not working out.
Well, indeed, it's not.
Tea to water bottles, it's not working out.
By the way, I just got some news, in fact, just before I started this break. I mean, there's a big EU foreign ministers meeting going to happen next week, but apparently no big decisions about this are going to be made then. Any decision about sanctions, EU-level sanctions, is being put off till October, mid-October, when there's an EU Council meeting. Now, by October, it's going to be very difficult to sustain a campaign against Nord Stream 2 for that long. So I don't see it happening, frankly. There's a rather curious comment, by the way, which is that apparently a EU official, of course, we don't know what that means. An EU official could cover all kinds of possibilities, but an EU official apparently said that, the EU is having difficulty understanding Russian actions. Now, when they talk like that, what they really mean is that they're in a mess because Russian actions, it seems to me, are perfectly straightforward and clear. It's the EU. It's a way of the EU admitting that they're in a mess and that they're arguing with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no other countries outside of Germany, if they decide to put anything other than token sanctions on Russia, they try to put any type of commercial sanctions. If I was like the representative of Greece, I would just be like, Malak, I don't care. You guys, we're not gonna put any sanctions, commercial sanctions on Russia over this nonsense. That's what I would say.
Indeed.
If I was any other country outside of Germany, I'd be like, just you guys, I don't care.
And of course, Germany's closest partner on Nord Stream 2, and of course the other German-speaking country in Europe, which is Austria, has basically come out. Well, I mean, the Austrian president has clearly come out in support of Nord Stream 2, and has. I mean, this is the present president of Austria, and he has said that it would be completely wrong to link Nord Stream 2 to the Navalny affair. So, I think it's extremely unlikely that anything's going to happen. But, you never know. All kinds of strange things can happen. And this has been a bizarre story all along.
All right. Let's switch gears real quick, and then we'll get to super chats. But let's switch gears. Alexander, Assange. Have you read the news? Have you heard the news of what Assange's lawyer said? Now, this is kind of news that we already have. Assange's lawyer said that representatives of Trump, in the form of Dana Rohrabacher, and I believe someone named Johnson, I forgot the name of a businessman or someone named Johnson, but Dana Rohrabacher, they approached Assange and they said they were representing Trump in some sort of manner, and that if Assange would give up his sources, would let them know his sources, then eventually Trump would make Assange's life easier, and he would be able to, essentially, they were hinting he would be able to walk free. What do you make of that? And I'll pull up the story. I'll try to get a quote so I could read it to you real quick.
I know. I mean, I should say that I know that one of Assange's lawyers has said that. And by the way, this is a person who I'm actually personally, I know her personally, Jen Robinson. I've met her and I know her quite well. But I'm going to say straight away, I am very skeptical.
That's her, by the way. That's Robinson. That she said it in court today.
Absolutely.
So she said it in court today. What I just said to you.
Exactly.
Here's a direct quote from Robinson. Rohrabacher proposed a win-win situation. Assange can get on with his life, a pardon in exchange for information about the source. That's from Robinson.
Yes, I'm skeptical about it. I'm going to say this straight away. In fact, I seem to remember that we had this story, up and running a few months ago, and Rohrabacher basically denied it. So that's what I still think that denial is probably the correct one. If my memory serves me rightly about this, I can't really believe this because it was pretty well known that Assange was not going to, would never publicize a source in that way. And I just don't think that kind of deal would have happened. I don't think anybody in the Trump team would have thought that sort of a deal was going to happen. And I think my memory of the Rohrabacher mission was that Rohrabacher went to Assange and they basically had a fairly good conversation in the Ecuadorian embassy, but that's all that it really was. One of the things to understand about this, and by the way, this is one part of the defense strategy in the Assange case with which I have serious doubts. I'm not sure. Generally, I think the defense lawyers in the Assange case have done a brilliant job. But I think what they have tried to argue is that the prosecution of Assange is very much driven by the Trump administration, by Donald Trump personally, as part of some kind of feud that Donald Trump has with the media. And this story seems to me intended to sort of strengthen that idea. I first of all, I don't agree with that. I think that's probably wrong. I don't think Donald Trump himself has any role in this prosecution. I don't think Attorney General Barr, who's the other person who's been identified as the villain, by the defense, the villain of the piece, has had much to do with this prosecution either. And I'm going to say, frankly, I think there is a danger that if by any possible chance, Biden wins the election in November, then that line of defense suddenly looks very fragile, because the US government can then simply turn around and say, well, not a problem anymore. You can extradite Assange to the US because it's no longer, if it ever was, a personal feud between Donald Trump and Assange, and Donald Trump coming after the media and trying to blackmail Assange into revealing sources and all that. Well, that doesn't apply anymore, because we've now got, this highly ethical and principled man, Joe Biden, as president, and he would never do any such things. And I think at that point, it suddenly, that whole line of argument that's being used at the moment starts to disintegrate. So I don't think it's a very important line of argument. I don't personally think it's a good one. I don't think the case is going to be decided about it. And about this specific story, I'm very, very skeptical about it indeed.
All right. So they're basically just trying to base much of the defense on Trump. That's a portion of their defense.
That's a portion of their defense. I think it's one mustn't overstate.
I'm trying to see why she would bring it up in court.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't want to suggest it. I don't want to overstate this. I don't think it's the most important part of the defense at all. And mostly, by the way, the defense is doing a very good job. At least that's my own assessment. But they have been trying to argue that there is some sort of personal animus towards Trump from within the Trump administration, and tie it into Donald Trump personally, and also to Barr. And as I said, I don't think this is really I don't personally think this is wise, and I don't think it's going to work. And I can see some problems with it going down the line. And I'm afraid I think this particular story is indeed part of that.
Yeah, it's a strange argument, in my opinion, because Trump came in, halfway through the game of Assange. I mean, yeah, he wasn't there from the beginning.
He wasn't.
If you want to put personal animus, I would say Hillary Clinton is a much better,
absolutely,
a much better case.
Absolutely,
since she wanted him. We have email documentation that Hillary Clinton wanted to execute Assange. So.
Absolutely. I mean, where it's arisen, by the way, the point that, the point where it came from is that it's known that the Obama DOJ decided that there would be huge problems about bringing a prosecution against Assange, because it was impossible to differentiate him from other journalists. So we know that was the case, but I think that and I think that's a very valid point for the defense to make. But I think for them to go further and to say that there is something on Trump's side which is personally driving this prosecution is certainly wrong, and I don't think that's at all the case. Hillary Clinton definitely had a massive animus against Julian Assange, and does so even more now. But I think the major pressure for this prosecution against Assange comes from elements of the US deep state, the intelligence community, the defense community, all those people. They're the people who really want to come after Assange, not Donald Trump.
Why are they still hell-bent on getting Assange to the US? If Trump is not as interested as you say, and I don't think he is as interested, if Barr is not that interested, why can't they, for lack of a better word, just let it go?
Well, I think they should let it go. I mean, that's obviously my view, but I think the reason why they're not letting it go is because he exposed what I would call war crimes, and I think that the security state does not like to have its crimes exposed in that way, and they're not just angry with Assange for doing it, but they also want to give a terrible warning to anybody who thinks of exposing them in that way again. So I think that's what's driving this whole thing. I think it's coming from those people. I absolutely don't think it's Donald Trump himself. I can't imagine a situation where Donald Trump gets up in the morning. Was it 5 o'clock in the morning that he gets up and picks up the phone to Barr and says, how are we doing on the Assange front? I think Donald Trump has other far more important matters concerning him than Julian Assange's prosecution. And I don't think he's had anything to do with it. I think people in the CIA, the Pentagon, the State Department even, there it's a different story. I think those people really do have a very strong reason for trying to silence Julian Assange.
Yeah. It's about silencing everybody, though, in the end.
Well, indeed. And in fact, just to quickly say, the British lawyer who represents the US government in these proceedings, he actually stood up and said that as far as the US government is now concerned, publishing any information, classified information, a journalist who publishes classified information is guilty of an offence under the Espionage Act. So if they win that, they can go after. Exactly, it's a precedent. They can go after anybody. And he also said, by the way, that Daniel Ellsberg, who published the Pentagon papers, he almost came to the point of saying that Daniel Ellsberg should have been convicted under the Espionage Act. So, that's the implications of that are pretty huge. And one can see why the US national security state, and by the way, the British national security state also, because they've been implicated in some pretty terrible things, quite independently of the US also, why the national security states of these countries would not want someone like Julian Assange and, WikiLeaks publicizing what they do, and would be very, very keen on getting that kind of precedent, which would enable them to silence other journalists who expose that kind of information.
Yeah, it seems to me that Assange is a piece to a much bigger puzzle that we're seeing played out right in front of us, with the lockdowns, with the censorship, with the social media deplatforming, with the mail-in ballots and the election fraud and everything that is going on around us. The way, they're dealing with people in Melbourne, Australia, and the lockdowns there, just everything that we're seeing in front of us. It seems that Assange is like just one piece to a much bigger puzzle that the globalists are trying to throw at us.
Absolutely.
That's what it seems like.
Absolutely. But we've never been in a more authoritarian situation than the one we're in now. We've discussed this many times on many programs, but there's controls on media, on public expression, on free expression. There's completely disproportionate behavior by law enforcement, not law enforcement, security forces in all sorts of places. It is very, very troubling. And you're absolutely right. Assange is just one part of it, an important part of it, though. And because it's still happening in the British courts, and I'm going to say this, which retain, in my opinion, especially at the higher levels, the High Court and the Supreme Court, but especially the High Court, you will find there still, especially in the High Court, judges of integrity. It is a battle that can still be won.
Yeah, it can still be won. I agree with you there. It's not over yet.
No, it's not
and
over
we
yet.
have an election in 46 days, and that can also be won.
Absolutely.
That can also turn the tide. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hope dies last. Alexander, let's do some super chats. And once again, YouTube changes everything around, so I'm going to try to get every super chat here. If I miss one, just let me know. Shoot me off an email. We'll get to it. Maybe on another live stream. Maybe we'll do a video about it. All right. From Asavet MD, $10 super chat. Dr. Bill in Gainesville, Florida. Thank you very much for that super chat. Asavet MD from Courtney. It's an obvious hoax. More of the same Russophobia that has infested the West ever since they discovered that Putin wouldn't be their sober Yeltsin. Good point.
Absolutely.
Good point. From Asavet MD, $5 super chat. It was a slow release, Novichok, in quotes. There you go. A slow release, Novichok. From Porton Down, especially made from Porton Down.
Which is, by the way, the best laboratory, the most expert laboratory in Europe
Yeah.
On these things.
I've had enough with these laboratories, these level 4 laboratories, Alexander. I'm laboratoried out with Porton down with Wuhan. Enough.
Well,
enough
I know you're quite right. And notice the one thing they all have in common: a complete lack of transparency about what they do. I mean, it's all secret. It's all classified. We're not allowed to know. We're not going to be told. The OPCW will not tell us. The German government won't tell us. The British government won't tell us. The Chinese government won't tell us. It's all secret. It can't be disclosed, and we are not entitled to know.
Yeah, let's just do away with all these laboratories. I think they've brought us enough grief already. From Valies, a $20 super chat. Thank you very much, Valies. We hope you are well. From Toilet Sauce, a $5 super chat. From Toilet Sauce. Like Alexander always says, when you are in a hole, stop digging.
Correct.
So that's why we say, Merkel, just stop this. Be done with it and move on. From Michelle Corley, $20 super chat. Road trip, another tournament. Thank you for the shout out. My grandson thought it was very cool. They won. Awesome. I'll be listening to my favorite duo, to my favorite news duo. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much, Michelle. We are happy that your grandson won his baseball game. I believe it was the baseball game, if I remember correctly. From Aulis Martinen, a $10 super chat with a thank you attached to it. A thank you graphic attached to it. Thank you very much for that super chat. From David Martin, $4.99. How do you think the American people will react if and when they try the coup? Will people start to realize what they are doing and try to stop it? Yes. Alexander, I know your thoughts on this. I'm just want to say one thing. I'm worried about it. And I'll tell you why, because there's news today that came out that said that the courts in Pennsylvania and I think Minnesota or Missouri, I'm not sure. I think it was Minnesota. The Supreme Courts in those states have ruled that mail-in ballots are valid for up to 2 weeks after the election, i.e. they have to be counted for after 2 weeks from the election, given that they're postmarked on November 2nd or November 3rd. One state was November 2nd, the other one was November 3rd. So any mail-in ballots that are postmarked on November 2nd, they have to be counted in the tally for up to 2 weeks past the election date. Yeah. Now, in a state like either Minnesota, Michigan, maybe it was Michigan. Actually, I think it was Michigan, where the difference was 10,000 votes in 2016. There you go. So, I mean, I am very worried because I see the courts are coming up with all kinds of interesting rulings.
Yes, and indeed, and I would love to know, by the way, where this 2 week time frame came from. I mean, did they pluck it out of the air? Is it based on some precedent, or rather?
I'll send you the article.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is a very, very, very interesting thing, actually, and very, very disturbing. One of the deep shocks to me, something I had not realized until Donald Trump became president and we started doing the Duran. It was strange, but the two were very close together. We started the Duran just before the 2016 election, but is the extent to which courts in the United States have now become incredibly politicized. We see this especially with the Flynn case. We saw that with the travel ban executive order, which Donald Trump signed, shortly after he became president. You had courts in all sorts of different parts of the country saying it was, illegal right across the United States, which seemed to be very, very bizarre. And these decisions, again, I mean, 2 weeks. Where do you get those 2 weeks from? Again, it seems to me that it's clearly intended to cast doubt on whatever result we have from those two states, Pennsylvania and Michigan, on election day. I mean, and to keep this thing in suspense for 2 weeks. I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, are we seriously expecting that these things will take 2 weeks to reach whoever's counting them? I mean, the whole thing boggles the mind. It's very, very worrying indeed. I mean, I think it's completely wrong. And I should say, by the way, that, I mean, another point which is in every country that I know of, apart, it seems, from the United States or parts of the United States, if people want to vote by mail, they do so before election day, not on election day itself. It seems to me a completely crazy thing, which is open to extraordinary amounts of abuse. So it's very ominous, very disturbing, very, very worrying. It's going to cast into doubt the election result in Michigan and Pennsylvania. It might indeed cast doubt on the whole US election. But to answer the specific question that the viewer posed, I think the American people, I've always felt this, have tremendous attachment to their constitution, their democratic system of government. I think that they will resist any attempt to manipulate the election outcome. Now, what form that resistance will take, it's not for me to try and guess. I'm not an American. I don't know what the feeling is in the United States. I don't want to encourage anything. But all I will say is, I think that whoever comes up with these ideas is going to play with fire, and I don't think it's going to work in the end. That's my view.
Very troubling.
But very troubled. Obviously very troubling, very concerning. And by the way, these decisions should be taken to the Supreme Court of the United States. Surely they should.
Yeah. Well, the Dems are going all in on this plan, the mail-in ballot plan. That's my take on it. They're going all in on it.
Well, of course they are. I mean, this is clearly what it's all about now. I mean, it's clearly an attempt to win the election on mail-in ballots.
That's what they've hatched. That's what they came up with when all was said and done. Russiagate, Ukrainegate, everything. When they went through everything that they've tried over the last 4 years, this is what they came up with in the end.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an appalling idea. I mean, it's terrible. But this seems to be, the only thing they really have left now.
Yeah. All right. From Michelle Corley, $5 super chat. Pulled over the scene, a stage, puzzle pieces around. Thank you very much, Michelle. Referring to Navalny, the scene is staged.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michelle, for that. From Juha, €5 super chat. Thank you very much, Juha, for that super chat. From Toilet Sauce, €50 super chat. Thank you very much, Toilet Sauce, for that generous super chat. Vladimir Ashurkov connects Navalny to Browder, while Pevchiki connects him to Khodorovsky. Is the whole thing a war between criminals? Apparently, Navalny has fallen out with Ashurkov, disobeying orders, so he may be replaced by Lyubov Sobol. Well, very interesting.
You are very, very obviously knowledgeable, very, very knowledgeable about all of this, and thank you very much for that very, very interesting, super chat and all that interesting information. Can I just say, anybody who knows about these, I don't know what to call them. I mean, we call them liberals, but I mean they're a strange sect of people. This tiny group of people who form this liberal non-system opposition community in Russia. The feuds and hatreds that exist between them and between their backers are just unbelievable. I mean, a lot of these people absolutely loathe and hate each other, and some of the backers behind them are pretty ruthless characters. So none of this would surprise me. And I will certainly follow up on that information, which sounds extremely well informed. But if it's true, thank you for conveying it to me. And frankly, as I said, you come across as a very well-informed person indeed. Lyubov Sobol, by the way, is a very interesting individual in herself. I can easily see her as replacing Navalny as the new face. I mean, it would make
up and coming agitator.
And the next up and coming agitator would surprise me too.
Absolutely, very, very well said. From Toilet Sauce, another super chat. Ashurkov is also involved with the Integrity Initiative propaganda campaign. That is interesting.
Well, that is indeed, because in case people in those of our viewers who don't know, the Integrity Initiative is a confirmed British intelligence operation. It's based in Britain, and it aims to basically manipulate, or at least control news reporting of Russian-related affairs. Its stated purpose is to fight Russian disinformation. But of course, when you fight Russian disinformation, as it's called, you are ultimately, it seems to me, engaging in news manipulation and therefore disinformation yourself.
Yeah. All right. From Asavet MD, $10 super chat. If Maria flew to Germany with the poison bottle, how does she get it through security? The only way would be if MI6 set everything up, correct?
Absolutely correct, and that's something that
you could get an empty bottle through, can't you?
Well, you can get an empty bottle through, but having said that, I mean, an empty bottle with, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing seems extremely unlikely to me, and I have to say, I think an empty bottle would probably be detected on the X-ray machines. The X-ray machines in London, by the way, are ferocious. You try and take things like that through the X-ray machines in a London airport, even an empty bottle, I think you'd have questions asked.
Very good, very well said. Good super chat there from Jen Krusting, 50 NOK super chat. Thank you very much, Jen, for that super chat. From JJHW, bringing a chemical weapon into Germany would be a crime. So why is Maria not in custody? Is she under diplomatic cover? Could be.
Well, she is, as they say, as we used to say in Britain, helping the police with their inquiries. That's how it would be explained in Germany, no doubt, that she's an important witness. Obviously, bringing a chemical agent, a nerve agent like that, even in a bottle, even samples of it, would be extremely dangerous. I would assume that this was all agreed about in advance, that people in Britain and people in Germany talked to each other, that it was confirmed that she would be coming with this bottle, that she was waved through the security at the airports on both sides.
Could have had someone on the inside of the airport too.
Exactly. But well, that's also true. But I'm assuming that, as I said, this was all arranged in advance.
Yeah, I mean, if it was this way that it occurred, then I'm sure MI6 would have had a lot of ways to get,
of course,
the chemical through.
Of course. I mean, can I just say something? I mean, it is inconceivable that the British authorities have not been kept informed of everything that's been going on. That is it's impossible that they have not been. I mean, they will have interviewed Maria. No question about it. They will have had an interest in doing it. No question about it.
All right. From Ron Hathaway, is a new member to the Duran community. Welcome, Ron. Welcome to the Duran community. From JHW, Russia got over Marxism, so the Oxbridge Marxists in the British government are enraged, and we haven't had an intelligence service since Blair's purge.
Well, there is some truth to this, actually. It's a very good point. I mean, one of the things to say is that there is a huge sense of animus on the part of some people in Britain, and by the way, in the United States also, against Russia, because, these people have their roots in Marxism, and they see Russia as having somehow betrayed the Marxist cause. I mean, there are, I've actually come across people who talk like that. So it's a strange attitude. I've always thought, but they do have it to a marked extent. And one of the odd things about this is that some of these Marxists that you find in Britain who talk like this are former Trotskyists, who were opposed to Russia when it was Marxist, because of course it was a different type of Marxism. But that is actually a very good point about that some of the left critique of Russia comes from that. It's not just that they don't see Russia they see Russia as a sort of conservative country, which they don't like. But they also see Russia as the country that basically betrayed the great cause. So there is that element definitely there too.
Betrayed the Marxist cause. You mean?
Betrayed the Marxist cause. So there is definitely that element there too. Now, about the intelligence services, I mean, Blair and the intelligence services, that's a very complicated and interesting story, but suffice to say, Blair took a huge interest in the intelligence services. And of course, at the time of the Iraq War, he made absolutely certain that he had all his people, all the people he trusted, in all the right positions in them. So his influence on the intelligence services is considerable.
All right, from Mr. Perpetual, the 1999 Super Chat. Thanks to both of you for all your great work. Thank you very much, Mr. Perpetual, for that Super Chat. From Caspian Lake, a $20 Super Chat. Thank you very much, Caspian Lake, for that Super Chat. And I think we have one more. Let me see if I can find it here. Yes, from Brando Commando, $5 Super Chat. Any chance you guys can make a Duran beanie or a winter hat for those of us that have long winters? Yes, Brando Commando, I am coming up with those, actually. They should be ready in a couple of weeks, but I definitely have a beanie and a winter hat coming out. So they will have the embroidered logo and all the country flags as well. I think that is everything. Yes, Alexander, you have anything else you would like to add? Any other news topics you would like to talk about before we sign off?
Well, I think let's. I'm very glad, Alex, that you brought up Assange. I should say that I've been actually quite close to some of the people who've been involved in the Assange trial, so I'm reasonably informed about it. I think this is an enormously important event. It's not getting covered in the media to the extent that it should be, and perhaps we ought to do a further program about it, because the next 2 weeks are going to be the most important in the trial, in my opinion, and it will give us a very good idea of where this is all going. Now, Britain, where I live, we're heading back into lockdown. It is increasingly looking so, because of the CV thing, so we've got all of that to think about. But overarching everything, as well as the rise of CV and all this, is the fact that we have the US election, and that's where the main focus is. It is the US where the shape of the world is being decided. And what you've just told me about the decisions in the Supreme Court decisions in Michigan and Pennsylvania, extremely ominous, as you correctly said.
Look, I will say it once, I'll say it 100,000 times. Trump has to win in a big landslide. Anything outside of a big landslide,
it's going to be disputed.
I think we're heading towards some very troubling times. I think it's just going to be a battle of lawyers then. He has to win by a big landslide. So like, say in Michigan, he has to win by, I'm just throwing a number out there, 100,000 votes. Yeah. So that there's no way, no matter how many mail-in ballots they forge, there's no way they can get to that number. That's
correct. That is absolutely correct. By the way, all of these issues about these disputes in the United States about the election and the worries about the United States are now being reported increasingly in the mainstream media here in Britain. We discussed in a recent video an article that had appeared in The Guardian. There's an even more clear article about all of this in the Financial Times. And interestingly, the Financial Times article took a rather more even-handed discussion of this. It accepted, it reported, for example, that the Democrats are quite likely to dispute the legitimacy of the election. They didn't just blame Trump for the whole thing. So, we're starting to get the rumblings of concern, even in the mainstream media, about what's going on in the US. And when that happens in Britain, that's an interesting sign that that the world is starting to take notice.
No, absolutely. You have a color revolution being staged in the United States as we speak.
Yeah,
it's clear as day. It's clear as day they're heading towards a color revolution. Just look at what happened in Belarus.
Oh, absolutely.
As an example, you get the election, you dispute it, and that's where the real battle starts. I don't know if you saw, real quick, Alexander, the people in the live stream as well. I don't know if you guys saw the interview with Steve Bannon on Tucker Carlson last night.
Well, I haven't seen it yet.
That video, but really fascinating to hear Steve Bannon talk about the case that was brought against him. He doesn't seem worried. Actually, he does seem to have a very good explanation as to what happened with that charity, at least his involvement, not the other people's, his involvement. It has to do with him being on contract. And he says he has all the evidence, and in court, he'll throw it out there. He seemed very, very confident with his side of the involvement. Saying that, Steve Bannon said it perfectly. He said it's after November 3rd. Without a landslide, it's after November 3rd that the real battle is going to take place. And he put out a notice to all Americans. He says, are you ready to fight? I don't mean fight in a violent way. Fight for your democracy and your constitution on November 3rd going forward, because that's going to be the real challenge, especially if you don't have a landslide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I will certainly watch that, because to me, that is, in fact, this is the huge story. I mean, the United States is still the central country in the world, the most important country in the world. It is the one which makes the weather. What happens in Russia is very interesting. With Navalny, we've done a program about it, and important. What happens in Germany is important. What happens in China is important. What happens in Britain is important. No country compares with the US in its importance today. And this election is really important. It will decide the kind of country the US is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating to hear Steve Bannon. Also, real quick, Tucker Carlson asked him, what he thinks if he's seen the poll numbers. And Steve Bannon didn't say it's going to be a landslide. He said Trump will win, but he refrained from saying a landslide. He said he will win. He's looking at the numbers. He says Trump's in a really good position. But the concern is really, I think the story is, by how much will Trump win? Will he win by enough to prevent the mail-in ballot plan? Or will that mail-in ballot plan have legs? That's, I think, the real thing we need to look out for.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah. All right. We'll end it there.
Absolutely. And again, always a wonderful program from our viewers. And by the way, if people want to suggest things that they want us to discuss on lives, come and propose them, and we will certainly discuss them.
We got one final super chat from Lucas Franca, and it says, why the MSN is so anti-Trump if Trump is so close to the Jews? Isn't that strange? Doesn't seem both sides obey to the same people.
Well, I think that I think all the sides in America if this is the Israel thing, I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the United States who is hostile to Israel. I don't think Donald Trump is particularly close to anybody. I think he is the president of the United States, and that's always been where he stands is. And I think that's why many millions of Americans support him.
Why is the MSN so anti-Trump?
Why is the MSM so anti-Trump? Because they're dominated by and controlled by neoliberal oligarchs. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Short and sweet, yeah. That's why they loved Obama.
Absolutely. They love Obama. They hate him. They hate Donald Trump because he believes in the sovereignty of the United States. He believes he is concerned about the United States. Neoliberal oligarchs are not interested in countries. They're not even interested very much in the people. Well, they're not interested in the people of those countries, apart, from being producers and consumers and whatever. But, they have no loyalty to these things because that's not what they are about. They have a completely different conception of a globalized world. But Donald Trump does concern himself about the United States. That's what, making America great again is all about. So that's why they hate him. And the media that they control attacks him all the time. In fact, can I just say something? Any politician who is attacked by the media in the way that Donald Trump is somebody who clearly the powers, are afraid of. And it's an infallible sign that he is serious about what he says he is.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who joined us on this live stream. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the comments in the stream as well. And thank you for hitting that like, for sharing, for everything you guys do. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. Check out our other channel, Alex Christoforou. You'll find videos there that I'm posting every day. And coming soon, Alexander Mercouris. Keep an eye out for it. We will announce it. Duran Shop, duranshop.com. Pick up some merchandise. And that is it for this live stream. Take care, everybody. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world.